game development here leads to content quality in the final chapter. It's just a transitory chapter where I have some narration and some viewer interaction in that narration format, questions and answers. It's all getting rolled into the architecture collection, which is the comprehensive compile of the distilled infrastructure that's being built here. Chapter 5.
I'm gonna add one comment about architecture. What I'm doing to create gameplay, is basically this. To understand my gameplay, you need to understand the type of game that I want to end up with. I know what type of game I want to end up with, basically, which is a game that depicts a whole bunch of possible layers of pathing, which only become apparent to the end player, the person studying the gameplay, in other words, through going through the same hallway 75,000 fucking times. The same thing Stanley Parable. The place Stanley Parable starts, essentially, as a narrative experience. You're gonna go through this hallway a lot of goddamn times, and so when a different one spawns, you're gonna be fucking mesmerized by it. You're gonna think it's the craziest, most amazing thing ever when you see that blue hallway that spawns in front of Stanley's office, instead of the standard yellow one. And this isn't even the blue office, this is a blue hallway that spawns some of the time. When they were making Stanley Parable, they didn't start with that idea and say, we're gonna amaze the player with this other hallway some of the time. What they did was they had player feedback saying they were bored with the office being exactly the same every single time it spawned. But this is the point with architecture. Architecture is the metaphysical math explanation of what that is. When you're experiencing a place, you're re-experiencing the place, and you're re-experiencing the re-experiences of the place. That's what architecture is. It's the structure that forms as you experience experiences over and over and over and over. It accumulates, in essence. It's the little purple square piling up into something. What is it? What if we've been able to arrange these squares into, / what are they arranging themselves into as they just happen to accumulate here in a way that we can neither stop nor cause to happen? It just happens. That's what architecture is telling us, is what is it that's accumulating here? Because as I craft this type of gameplay, I can't do it on purpose. I can't make an idea happen on purpose. It has to be a mistake. It has to be an accident. So the only way that actually can happen is by doing the work that's not the accident. The part of the work that is intentional is not the part of the work that gets the game to be made. The part of the work that's accidental is the part of the work that gets the game to be made. So architecture is basically where you're inhabiting something that is accumulated, the part that's already known, the part that you understand. Architecture is player housing. It's what exists because of the choices that you're making, basically. Player housing. That's what the word architecture actually means. So I discovered this idea after walking around and around the circle of the Minecraft, till I discovered I'm the ghost who waits. But then the question was, well, what does that mean? What does waiting mean? Well, it means lurking. It means sitting around inside of a structure that's been made and living in it, and stopping all the way there, going all the way down into it. So the exit portal for this chapter is actually about that insight. That's why I'm talking about it right now, because I'm writing the exit portal pages right now. And I mean, I think this is really the real exit portal. Like, this is the stop here for chapter 2, world 2. Stop here was basically the secret area, secret ending that bridged from, that actually exited you out of, so it was exit portal's just another name for the secret ending. It transfers you into the next world, basically, if you choose to use it. So, I've been building this chapter while doing the minimal streams that I have, but I have a huge repository of the scripts pages as they're currently compiled, and ones that I still need to finish compiling for this. So we'll get into that more in a little bit, but we're going to listen to some Radiolab. It's called More or Less Human, and it's actually this incredible second-person mode, maybe even the foundational particle, the first particle where I had the idea for the second-person mode thing that is inside of these koans. But to get to that, we have to finish listening to this project recap that recaps just all the way through the very first content I made streaming to right now.
I think that's it. We did it.
It was a strange moment. We were all clapping at our own demise. Because, you know, Turing had laid down this number of 30%, and the bot had fooled way more people than that.
I'm just now going to ask you, having been a veteran of this.
And we should just qualify that this was a really unscientific, super sloppy experiment.
But on the other hand, and we talked to Brian about this when it was over, it really does suggest something, that maybe what's changed is not so much due to the machines becoming more and more articulate. It's more like us, the way we, you and I, talk to one another these days.
We've gone from interacting in person to talking over the phone to emailing to texting. And now, I mean, for me, the great irony is that even to text, your phone is proactively suggesting turns of phrase that it thinks you might want to use. And so, I mean, I assume many people in this room have had the experience of trying to text something and you try to say it in a sort of a fun, fanciful way, or you try to make some pun where you use a word that's not a real word, and your phone just sort of slaps that down.
All the time.
Guys, I do not communicate this way. But what I do is extraordinarily different from what people do. I'm neurodivergent. I'm extremely non-neurotypical in a particular way that's not well understood. So the reason why I think about the Turing test a lot is because creative consciousness describes a Turing test analog within which we recognize any memeified entity, as it were. Any character that's been pushed out into the collective consciousness, whether that's a Shakespeare character, a model, a musical artist, or any kind of performer of any kind of content or information whatsoever, which is a character whose performance represents fiction that is performed, whether the person doing it realizes it or not. Example, a stage name, performance where it's obviously not meant to be fictional, like novel literature, but this is what happens in the type of art that involves performance, performative artwork, human experiences performed and documented. The Turing test basically kind of illuminates an entire sphere of sight where we can look at experience and understand what being human is, how being human is constituted. Because that's what the Turing test is asking. How is being human constituted? How is being a conscious entity constituted? How is it measured? How is it determined? Are we aware of being conscious? Are we interacting with someone who's aware of being conscious? And at what point do the two of us in that experience have a differentiated consciousness versus one consciousness? And I think that's the wrong question. That question's being asked in the wrong way once you start trying to differentiate it. The thing that is important with the Turing test is the idea of an entity's definition being pushed into the collective consciousness. The example I will always give in this category for practical purposes is 9 Inch Nails, the music entity, created by Trent Reznor. People don't understand what 9 Inch Nails is, or why the entity of 9 Inch Nails exists as distinct from Trent Reznor or Trent Reznor / Atticus Ross. But this is why the Turing test thought, the question being asked by the Turing test is why. It's because what a thing is, information-wise, is its own manifestation of sensation, separate from individual humans watching it or producing it, either performing or watching the performance, being the performance, or just absorbing it. Those are human activities, but the thing, the information transferring, isn't necessarily part of anybody's present now. It's transitory. It's the thing that's binding us together. Somehow. It's somehow human, whilst being superconscious, outside the grasp of any participant, either the listener or the speaker. This is how second person mode plugs you into listening to you in the spontaneity vibe. I was talking to some people yesterday and this amazing term came up, vibrarian. That's who Gnomefire is. I forgot the command for him, but he's the vibrarian. I have like 10 million emotes because I have shitloads of gifted subs and also shitloads of ones that I sub on purpose. This is just the way of Twitch. This is what the Turing test gets at, is information of entity, of identity that's actualized somehow separately from all the intentions of either the performers or the listeners to the actual art, to the literary content. That's the thread we're pulling on here in World 2.
Normal.
Which make it really hard to use words that aren't.
Due to the machines becoming more and more articulate, it's more like us, the way we, you and I, talk to one another these days.
We've gone from interacting in person to talking over the phone to emailing to texting. And now, I mean, for me, the great irony is that even to text, your phone is proactively suggesting turns of phrase that it thinks you might want to use. And so, I mean, I assume many people in this room have had the experience of trying to text something and you try to say it in a sort of a fun, fanciful way, or you try to make some pun where you use a word that's not a real word, and your phone just sort of slaps that down and just replaces it with something more normal.
Which make it really hard to use words that aren't the normal words, and so you just stop using those words and you just use the words the computer likes.
They make you use
exactly.
it.
So in a sense, what seems to be happening is that our human communication is becoming more machine-like.
At the moment, it seems like the Turing test is getting passed not because the machines have met us at our full potential, but because we are using ever more and more kind of degraded, sort of rote forms of communication with one another.
Well, so why don't we begin by this story of yours largely takes place in a laboratory in Barcelona.
Yeah, it's a lab. It's in Barcelona.
And it's run by a couple, Mel Slater and Mavi Sanchez Vives.
Mavi Sanchez Vives. I'm a neuroscientist.
And they have these two VR labs together.
VR as in virtual reality. And Josh, a little while back, took a trip to Barcelona to experience some of the simulations that Mavi and Mel put people in. He went to their campus, showed up at their lab.
You feel sort of like you're going to a black box theater.
Oh.
It's sort of like a lot of big rooms, all covered in black with curtains. There's a lot of dark spaces. And
The researchers then explained that what's going to happen is he's going to put on a headset, sort of big helmet.
They put on the head-mounted display, and eventually it turns on.
The visuals start to fade in.
And this room appears.
you're standing in a sort of generic room.
The graphics look straight out of like a Windows 95 computer game.
It's like the loading screen of the VR. And then that dissolves. Then it's replaced with the simulation. And when the simulation started, I was standing in front of a mirror.
A digital mirror in this digital world, reflecting back at him his digital self, his avatar.
So basically you move and your virtual body moves with you.
And I could see in the mirror a reflection of myself, but the person the self that I saw reflected, she had a body, she was a woman.
She.
Yeah. So I think when people think of virtual reality, they often imagine wanting to have like realistic experiences in VR. But that's not what Mel and Mobby do. They are interested in VR precisely because it lets you experience things that you could never experience in your real body in the real world.
You can have a body that can be completely transformed and can move and can change color and can change shape. So it can give you a very, very unique tool to explore.
You know, in their work, they'll often, in these VR worlds, turn men into women, as they did for Josh for his first time out. They will often take a tall person and then make them a short person in the VR so that they can experience the world as a short person might, where they have to kind of crane their neck up a bunch. They'll change the color of your skin in VR and run you through scenarios where you are having to experience the world as another race. And what's remarkable is that in all of these manipulations, apparently you adjust to the new body very quickly. And they've done physiological tests to measure this, that it takes almost no time at all to feel as if this alien body is actually yours.
They call this the illusion of presence.
You know, we think of our body as a very stable entity. However, by running experiments in virtual reality, you see that actually in 1 minute of stimulation, our brain accepts a different body, even if this body is quite different from your own.
And this flexibility that our brains seem to have can lead to some very surreal situations. This is really the story that brought us to Josh. He told us about another VR adventure where, again, he put on the headset, this world faded up.
And I was sitting in a chair in front of a desk in a really cool looking modernist house.
Wooden floors, and then there is some glass walls,
And through the glass walls I could see fields with wildflowers.
green grass outside.
Again, he noticed a mirror, and this time the reflection in the mirror was of him. It was a realistic-looking avatar of him. And after checking out his digital self for a while, he turned his head back to the room and realized that across the room there was another desk.
And behind this other desk there was Freud was sitting there.
Who?
Freud.
Sigmund Freud?
Sigmund Freud, the psychoanalyst.
So a middle-aged man with a big brown beard?
He had a beard, he had glasses, and he was just sitting there with his hands folded in his lap.
So Josh is sort of taking this all in. He's looking at Freud. Freud's looking back at him. And then
Okay, now
he hears the voice of a researcher in his ear coming through his VR helmet.
tell Freud about your problems. Any problem.
She explained what you're going to do is you're going to explain a problem that you're having, a personal problem that you're having to Freud. Something that's bothering you in your life. And she said, take a minute, think about what you'd like to discuss.
Did something immediately jump to mind?
Yeah, so, you know, my mom had a stroke a few years ago, and she's in a nursing home, and I'm her guardian. So she's young, she's 65, but because of this stroke, she like needs 24-hour care, and she can't talk. She doesn't have any words anymore. So it's a very tough thing for me. I thought really hard about where she should live. I live here in New York. My mom lives in Virginia.
Josh says he really debated for a long time. Should he put her in a nursing home in New York, where he can be closer to her, or should he put her in a nursing home in Virginia, where he would be far away?
She has all these friends and family members down there. So in the end, I decided to, find a place for her there where there's lots of people who can visit her. So I go down maybe once every month or 6 weeks to see my mom. But then every weekend, someone from this group of friends or family relatives visits her down there. Whereas if she were up here, I'd be the only person. So that's the decision I made. But
you don't feel really happy about it.
Yeah, I feel guilty about it.
Like he was a terrible son. And he says he would especially have that feeling each week after her friends would visit her in the nursing home and then send him an email update saying, hey, this is how your mom is doing. Every time he would read one of those emails, even if she was doing well, his stomach would just drop.
This problem, this emotion, feeling guilty, is one I've felt for a while. So I said to Freud, my mom is in a nursing home in another state, and friends and family visit her, and they send me reports on how she's doing, and I always feel really bad when I get these reports.
And this is said in your voice. If you'd gazed at the mirror while you were talking, would you be saying it?
Yeah.
So after he said this to Freud,
The world sort of faded out to black, and then it faded back in.
and suddenly the world had shifted. He was now across the room, behind the desk that had just been opposite him, and he was inside the body of Freud. He looked down at himself. He was wearing a white shirt, gray suit. There was a mirror next to that desk, and he looks at himself.
I have the little beard, everything.
Looked just like Freud.
But the main thing that was really surprising was that across I could see myself. So this is the avatar of me now. And I watched myself say what I had just said. So
Oh, wow. So
Oh.
it plays it back?
Exactly. The recording is now replayed, the movements and also the voice. And they see themselves as they talked about their problem.
So first I can see I'm sitting in the chair and sort of uncomfortable. I'm moving around. I take my hands and put them in my lap and fold them together, and then I take them apart and I put them together. I can watch myself be nervous. And then I saw myself say what I just said. My mom is in a nursing home in another state, and friends and family visit her, and they send me reports in my voice. Moving the way I move, and it was just like me watching myself. And I guess the best way I can describe that was it was moving.
What?
Moving.
Moving like as emotionally.
Yeah, emotionally moving. I mean, I felt. I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but you know how there's a point in your life where you realize that your parents are just people?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was kind of like that, except it was me.
Oh, interesting. Did you feel closer to that guy, or
I felt bad for him.
you felt bad for him?
Sorry.
Yeah, my feelings went out to this other person, who was me.
As he's having this empathetic reaction as Freud, looking back at himself, the researcher's voice again appears in his ear.
Give advice from the perspective of Sigmund Freud, advice of how this problem could be solved, how you could deal with it.
Essentially, respond to your patient.
So I didn't know what to say, so I said, why do you think you feel bad? That was
a good Freudian kind of thing.
yeah. Why do you think you feel bad?
As soon as he asks that, shoop, he's back in his body, his virtual body, staring back at virtual Freud, and he sees a playback of Freud asking him that question.
I watched Freud say this to me.
Why do you think you feel bad?
Except that when Freud talks, they had some thing in the program that made his voice extra deep.
Oh.
It has some voice distortion, it's a deeper voice.
And so his voice didn't sound like my voice.
How did you respond as now you?
I said I feel bad because it doesn't seem right that I'm living far away.
Once again, shoop, he switches bodies. Now he's in Freud again, staring back at himself.
And I watched myself say this. I feel bad because... And then as Freud, I said, well, why are you far away then?
Shoop, back into his own body. Freud says to him from across the room,
Why are you far away then?
And I said, well, because if my mom lived in New York, I'd be the only person here. But if she's down in where she lives, then there's other people to visit her.
shoop,
Back in Freud's body. And I said, so it sounds like there's a reason why you live where you live. So if you know that, why do you still feel bad?
shoop, switches back to himself.
If you know that, why do you still feel bad?
I said something like, you're right. And went back into Freud. And then as Freud, I said, it sounds like the thing that's making you unhappy, which is making you feel bad, which is getting these reports from these people, is actually the whole reason why you decided to live in these, to keep your mom where she is. Like there's a loop, right? It's like these reports I get from my mom's friends make me feel bad, but the whole reason why I decided to leave her in this place in Virginia is specifically so that there are friends who can visit her.
There's this classic idea in psychology called the reframe, which is where you try and take a problem and reframe that problem into its solution. And he says in that moment, he kind of did that. He had this very simple epiphany that his guilt was actually connected to something good.
I never had that thought before.
He chose to keep his mom in Virginia so that her friends would visit her more, and each time her friends visited, he felt bad, but that meant they were visiting. So the bad feeling, and the fact that he was feeling it so much, was itself kind of evidence for the fact that he had made, if not the right decision, at least a decision that made sense.
The experience I had talking to myself as Freud was nothing like the experience I had in my own head, turning this issue over and over.
By switching back and forth, by swapping bodies, somehow you can give advice from a different perspective.
When I was back in my own body and Freud said it to me, I just felt like, wow.
That's so
Good
weird.
point. That was my
But wouldn't your next thought be, what the hell is going on here? Why am I able in this utterly fictive situation to split myself in two and heal myself?
Well, I took the headset off, and I sat there for a little while the researchers looked at me, trying to make sense of it. And I think what I keep coming back to is the seeing yourself just as a person, not as you, not with all the complexities and stuff that is in your self-experience of being yourself.
And this might be the real key thing. Like, when you are in your body, which you pretty much always are, you have all of these thoughts and feelings which are attached to that body. It's sort of like when you go home for Thanksgiving and you walk into your parents' kitchen and suddenly you just kind of feel like you're a teenager again. Like all those same thought patterns from your youth kind of kick back into gear because the context of that kitchen is powerful. And your body, is that writ large. But if you can jump out of it and go into a new one, suddenly all those constraints and all that context is gone.
When I'm embodied as Freud, not only do I look different and think this is my body, but I feel different, and I have different types of thoughts, and I see people differently.
And Josh says what he saw when he was Freud, looking back at himself, was just a guy who needed help.
When someone comes to you and asks for help, your feelings are not complicated. They're just tenderness, kindness. Your instinct is to help them.
And he says he was able to bring that very simple way of being back to himself.
Did it make a difference? Did you walk out of that with a different feeling about yourself?
I did. I think I've had a feeling of... I think it revised my feeling about who I was a little. I think it made me feel a little more... I don't even have a word for it. Just a little more human.
Josh Rothman is a writer for The New Yorker. His story first appeared there, and we told it to that live audience at the Green Space.
So, Brian, this is you get the last word.
To me, this is really interesting because the history of chatbots begins with a chatbot program written in the 60s by an MIT professor named Joseph Weizenbaum. And the program was called ELIZA, and it was designed to mimic this non-directive Rogerian therapist where you would say, I'm feeling sad. It would just throw it back to you as a kind of Mad Lib. I'm sorry to hear you're sad. Why are you sad? And Weizenbaum was famously horrified when he walked in on his secretary just like spilling her life's innermost thoughts and feelings to this program that she had seen him write. So there's no mystery there. But he came away from that experience feeling appalled at the degree to which people will sort of project human intention onto just technology. And his reaction was to pull the plug on his own research project, and for the rest of his life, he became one of the leading critics against chatbot technology and against AI in general. And I think it's really powerful to juxtapose that against the story that you've just shared, which tells us that there's more to the picture than that there are ways to use this technology in a way that doesn't sort of distance us, but in a way that sort of enables us to be more fully human. And I think that's a wonderful way to think about it.
Well, why don't we just leave it there, pleasantly? We have some thanks to give, but we have particular thanks to give to the person who made this whole cybersphere around us possible. That's Lauren Kunze. Lauren, that's Lauren.
Thank you to Pandora Bots, which is a platform that powers conversational AI software for hundreds of thousands of global brands and developers. Learn more about their enterprise offering and services at pandorabots.com. Thanks also to Chance Bone for designing the Robert or Robot artwork for tonight. And of course, to Brian Christian for coming here to talk with us tonight.
Thank you. And to you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you
you
all.
guys so much.
Alright, that's the whole thing. That was 1 hour. I'm gonna play the other sound, not this one. I like the other one better. Except Radiolab does so much musical stuff with their... But it's hard to keep listening to this one while listening to Radiolab, but so actually the second person mode is invoked into this situation where you're looking at a game character. No matter what you do, the you that's looking and the you that you're controlling is an invocation of second person mode, period. Even if you don't add narration and questions and dialogue. It is. It moves you slower than when you add those other elements, but it moves you. Like that guy said in the fucking story, that he was moved by it. That is precisely what happens to you when you play the Beginner's Guide or Stanley Parable. You are moved by it. You are experiencing the motion of second person mode. It's analogous to a taxi ride. Any kind of traveling, transportation. This is where I reconcile a transporter with a translator. Somebody who carries you through experiences is doing so using a vehicle. The vehicle which carries you through the fucking experience that it's carrying you through. The driver of the vehicle is its author, as it were. The driver is carrying you. The driver is translating you. And this zeroes directly into a parable in which someone's asking, why is there only one pair of footprints? And the answer is, that one pair of footprints was me carrying you.